Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm now joined by Seb Stafford-Bloor. Hi, Seb.
Hi, Joe Devine. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm lonely in the studio though because there's no one here except me, and you are of course in Hamburg, Germany.
I sure am. I'm also lonely, so maybe our loneliness cancels out. I'm not sure. I'm in an office by myself. You have Don and Sol with their lovely hands.
You're always lonely. But not today, because we have so much to discuss. Alex and JJ are on holiday, which is great because it means we can have a proper football conversation and not one that's all about numbers and tactics. Who wants that? I want to talk about the fight between Tanganga and Zaha. And I was going to say I want to talk about Harvey Elliott's injury, but that was horrific. We will come to that. Not in a fun way at all. But we're going to try and cover as many games as possible. A little bit on the continent too. It's a fantastically packed show, Seb.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping for a lot from the continent, not a little bit. I mean, when we talked about this last night, it felt as if that segment would be a bit larger.
Well, you've put two things down.
There's three things. There's three things. You just haven't looked at the plan carefully.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see when we get there. But if you haven't looked at the plan also, then you should visit The Athletic. Because when you read The Athletic, you don't need to read any plans. You show up everywhere ready for your football conversation without needing to, research in a difficult way. Because The Athletic is fun. If you visit theathletic.com/Tifo, you'll find that you can get a 30-day free trial. That's right. You can try it free for 30 days. And do you know what I did with it this morning, Seb?
Tell me, Joe, did you learn stuff?
I read a Greg Evans match piece on the Aston Villa-Chelsea game. Greg Evans, or as we call him here, Greg Evans.
You kind of gave him a mononym like Heathcliff.
Yes, Greg Evans, which was really interesting. And we'll come to discuss that a little bit on Aston Villa later, Chelsea Aston Villa. But that's theathletic.com/Tifo. I would encourage you to go and try it out. Hey, it's free for 30 days. What have you got to lose? Nothing. You have nothing to lose. Nothing. Anyway, that's all for now. And I will leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace of Sebastian Stafford-Bloor. Right, where else to begin? I mean, there's probably lots of other places, but where else to begin than with Crystal Palace 3-0 Tottenham? This was a fun game, Seb. There are several things I want to ask you about this. As a Spurs fan yourself, it might be a little difficult for you, but I wanted to talk about Ollie Skip when we do come to talk about Spurs. Also, Emerson Royal's debut, we can talk about that too. But Crystal Palace really made a fool of Spurs, let's put it that way. Let's do Palace first. They were hot to trot.
Yeah, no, I think it's right to start with Palace because they were good. Let's not get sucked into how abysmal Tottenham were, because it feels like Palace have got this growing identity. They've brought in a kind of collection of newer, younger players, including Colin Gallagher on loan, who I thought was absolutely brilliant. You were really impressed with him as well, weren't you?
Yeah, big time. I said to you during the game, I don't think I've caught any of Palace's previous games so far this season, and I said, if he could shoot on target, he'd be amazing. And you informed me that he has shot on target before.
He has shot on target and scored on target at West Ham. Palace weren't that good against West Ham, but he was part of their a comeback which almost came from nowhere, 2 really well-taken goals. And ironically, the thing that was missing from his performance on Saturday was a little bit of composure in front of goal. But everything he did up to shooting was absolutely brilliant. He looks like if he were to go back to Chelsea, he would be in contention there. Looks like he should be. I mean, he wouldn't be, realistically. Yeah. But looks like a very, very good player.
He does. He reminds me of Todd Cantwell, but I think it's just the hair.
It's the flapping blonde hair. He reminds me a little bit of more Mason Mount, actually, in the way that he receives possession. Doesn't quite have the attacking output that Mount does, but in the way that he receives the ball in between the lines, the way that he does things with it very neatly and very efficiently, and with that kind of that slightly understated skill, he looks brilliant.
Well, another player for Palace who had his debut over the weekend and was also brilliant, Odsonne Edouard, who I'm suddenly wishing JJ was here to correct me if I'm wrong in saying that he came from Celtic.
Sure did. You don't need JJ to reassure you. I can do that too.
Well, can I say I love it whenever a good player comes from the SPL, because when they inevitably perform well in the Premier League, you get Twitter awash with all people saying, see, he is good. This isn't a rubbish league. And very true, because what a performance he put in. He was sensational. He almost made me feel bad for Christian Benteke, because he scored with his first touch after coming on to replace Benteke, who'd been kind of frustrated by his chances throughout the game. But hey, that's clinical.
Very clinical. I also feel sorry for Christian Benteke, because actually, not in a spectacular 30-goal a season way, but he has improved quite significantly over the last year, and his contribution to what Palace are has got a lot better. He's not the hopeless case he was.
No.
Still a very, very strange career. But yeah, when you have a player making his debut for Palace, contrasting with all the other issues Palace have had in recruiting that position. So forget Benteke, think about players like Connor Wickham or Alexander Sorloth. It's quite a long list of players who haven't done what they're supposed to do and who have disappointed. So it's the perfect start. I mean, if you're
neither goal was spectacular either, but that's not what you want. You just want a player to show up and put his chances away, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, yeah, his second goal I think was bad goalkeeping. I think the first goal was really nicely taken. There's a little bit of a deflection in there, but I thought the movement and the little bit of skill to fashion the angle for the shot was great. So I was fully impressed. And he that thing about players coming down from Scotland, it is very hit and miss. And you're right, whenever this happens, there's a kind of a chorus of, see, not a Farmers League.
Yeah.
And that's true. But if you look at the history, if you look at, for instance, Virgil van Dijk's first few months in England, it's a bit tricky. He had a few really ugly moments that people have forgotten at Southampton, obviously deservedly, because he grew into a fantastic player. But you're never quite sure. So you think it's doubly important for a player to start well and to feel like he belongs and that he doesn't have quite as much to prove over the coming weeks.
Yeah,
very healthy.
Yeah, totally. Zaha also, of course, already proven himself over numerous seasons, but he was fantastic. I particularly enjoyed this game for the sort of spat that he had. For the fight that he had with Tanganga, who a little bit of inexperience and naivety, perhaps. I know that's a cliche to say after a younger player falls for a temper tantrum like that. But it's very impressive, isn't it? Because Zaha kind of loves a battle like that, I think. And Alan Shearer on Match of the Day was talking about how his favourite thing is to get close to his marker so he knows when he can turn, you can feel him behind him. He doesn't necessarily want that space that other wingers want. And he's got the power and the speed to turn inside, as we saw numerous times against Tottenham. Tanganga kind of just fell for it in that moment, didn't he?
Yeah, I feel a little bit sorry for him, because the first yellow card, both yellow cards are clearly yellow cards, but the first yellow card results from Lucas Moura going down injured at the other end of the pitch, Palace deciding to play on, which they're entitled to, and Tanganga being left in a pretty precarious one-on-one with Will Zaha, which is a pretty lonely place, you'd have thought, and kind of somewhere between, I don't know, like a wrestling move and a rugby tackle. Just it was a bring him down, stop the play with any means necessary.
It looked like he was already angry that Palace hadn't stopped. That sort of annoys me in games too. Like, obviously, if it's a head injury, I understand why the play has to stop.
Yeah, players have always misunderstood this.
I honestly don't think they do. I just think it's the same as like claiming for a foul when you know it's not a foul. I think sometimes the referee will stop the game. That we see that, like, it's almost 50-50 now in the Premier League. If there's an injury that isn't a head injury, a player goes down and lots of players corral the ref about it, sometimes the ref stops the game. So I think that's what happened, and I think it's looked to me like Tanganga was kind of pissed off that the play hadn't stopped, and he pushed Zaha over. And he was lucky in some ways not to be carded twice for that offence and then the kind of spat afterwards. Because if Zaha gets a yellow for his reaction, then why doesn't Tanganga get a yellow for his reaction to the reaction?
I think what we're railing against here is convention in two senses. Because one, you're quite right. Unless it's a head injury, the referee isn't compelled to stop the game. No. And also, historically, players have abused this privilege. We've seen it so many times. Player goes down injured, there's a break. He thinks, if I stay down injured, I kind of compel the other team to put the ball out, or I make it really awkward. The thing with the fight, in big block capital letters and exclamation mark, the fight, was that you could probably have made a case for both players being sent off. Yeah. Because I agree with you. I think
it's quite bad.
Yeah, Tanganga's tackle is certainly worth a yellow.
Yeah.
His reaction to Zaha's reaction is probably worth a yellow too. And a stricter referee might have sent Zaha off because
Zaha does like an incredible kind of like it's sort of something you would see in a martial arts film where he does everything with his hands except touch his face. He swings his arms really fast, but he misses by a millimeter every time, obviously intentionally, and therefore doesn't incur the worst punishment. But I don't know. I can understand. I think the ref giving both players a yellow card is kind of good thing for the game. I sort of enjoyed that moment a little bit guiltily, but so I'm glad that there wasn't a sending off just there. But of course, Tanganga 2 minutes later, he's obviously hadn't, he'd let it get to him, which is understandable.
Too much adrenaline. Yeah. So I follow a coach on Twitter, Harry Robinson, who he was talking about how when that happens to a player, not that this option was really available to Spurs because of what they had on the bench, but you need to take a player off. Because you're not going to be able to find an equilibrium, and you're not in the sort of the 20 minutes afterwards when you're away from home, the crowd's on your back, and the crowd actually wants a second yellow card for anything that he does after that. Yeah. And he tries to redeem himself a little bit because he wins a tackle, the ball breaks, and Spurs are under pressure. He's trying to kind of seize the momentum back for his side. He lunges in. Clearly, it's a yellow card. Obviously, he needs to be sent off for that. But you can understand what's happened. It's not one of those unforgivable moments. It's more of someone on the pitch, someone in a leadership position, coach from the sideline needs to do something. And okay, they can't take him off, but you need to have control of that. You need your senior players to police that scenario because he's a young player. He's going to make mistakes because that's how young players learn. And
I totally get it, man. Like my main reaction to that is yes. I understand why this has occurred. I would do this too. I would be furious, man. I know I'm a happy-go-lucky, light-hearted guy, but honestly, you should see me like playing video games online sometimes, Seb. I completely lose it. The rage takes me. And I'm trying to think last night after I watched this game on Saturday, trying to think, putting myself in the shoes of a footballer.
Oh, hang on. I've got a nice segue for this because you let it be known over the weekend that you lost 6 games of Rocket League in a row.
I did.
So how did you feel as...
Absolutely furious. I punched myself in the knee. I was furious.
At what point did you start becoming angry? Not just kind of,
after the first game. During the first game. And it's all in my head. It's like what I imagine that the other person thinks. It's not, But the point is, when I'm putting myself in the shoes of a footballer, when your opposition or your marking number or whoever is maybe just talking to you, is chatting a little bit at you, a little bit of smack talk perhaps, is pushing you around a little bit, is getting away with things that the referee isn't. Look, I honestly, as soon as I thought about it in that way, I don't know how I would do it. I don't think I could. I suddenly have so much respect for footballers who manage not to lose it every time that something like that happens. Because I think if someone said something rude to me on a football pitch, I honestly think I would lose it. Not in an aggressive, violent way, but I'd lose my cool and I'd say something back, or I'd walk off, or I'd be in a strop. It doesn't take very much to put me in a strop. So I have maximum respect for footballers who have the ability to deal with that on a weekly basis, let alone the thousands and thousands of people in the crowd who are calling you all sorts of things for 90 minutes. It must be really difficult to put that behind you.
Also at a ground like that, because if you've been to Selhurst Park, you know how close the stands are to the pitch. And so the incident happens on that far touchline, right by the fans. So can you imagine how lonely a position that is for someone who's played fewer than 50 Premier League games? Mm-hmm. He's on a yellow card. He also knows that he's facing a player as talented as Wilf, so half the rest of the game. And you would feel like you had, it's not a very big ground, but that would feel like about 60,000 people in the moment. And it must be incredibly difficult. And I also think fans are very, very harsh on players. They're very, very critical. And sometimes, like you say, a bit of humanity, a little bit of understanding for what the external pressures are in that situation would be good. Because he'll see Zaha again. There are two, each team plays each other at least twice a season. So learn from it, move on. Understand next time that there are players in the league who are going to want to put you in that situation. And I think part of Zaha's reaction was a little bit confected. Intentionally so. He wanted to create the scenario that he was able to then take advantage of. Fantastic, good for him.
He's very intelligent.
But you've got to be able to cope with that as a defender. And that's just a really harsh lesson to learn.
I couldn't. Do you know what else I couldn't cope with? I also couldn't cope with being Harry Kane And I believe, according to Opta, let me just find my stat here. Yes, according to Opta, this is the first game ever in Kane's career that he had neither a shot or a touch in the opponent's box when he played the full 90. Which is, I mean, we've seen games over the last year or so with Harry Kane under Mourinho and perhaps now, I suppose, under Nuno too, where he's been very isolated up top. Extremely so in this game. I don't think Tottenham had a shot, possibly in the whole game, certainly not in the first half.
Lucas Moura had one at the beginning of the second half. It wasn't it was never going to be a goal. It was just straight down the goalkeeper's throat. But there was one that I remember. I can't remember many others.
They were so poor. And this kind of felt like the first game that perhaps the more negative expectation of Nuno before his arrival. Obviously, win 3 games in a row and everyone's happy about it. But this felt like the first Nuno game. I know that's an unfair way of putting it. You know what I mean?
No, I think that's definitely fair, but I don't think it was as different to the first 3 games as it seemed. That obviously the result and the personnel and the sort of texture of the performance. But if you look at the balance between defensive and attacking play, wasn't so different. It just, I don't know, the Kane thing, you take Son Heung-min out of the side, you lose a lot of the kind of the back and forwards. That's a lot of your counter-attacking thrust, and that can sometimes give the impression of a team that have a little bit more creativity. There was no Lo Celso. Tanguy and Dembele is not fit, not particularly into the idea of playing for Tottenham at the moment. Big problems at centre-half. So you've got a team there that have a lot of structural weaknesses, which invites, if from a manager, quite a conservative midfield selection, which is what Nuno did. And there was no passing creativity. Kane doesn't look fit at the moment, really. I think that showed a little bit during the international break. He had a couple of nice moments for England, but nothing like the level of influence that you'd expect from him. And this is probably a legacy of arriving back late from the summer. And it was very discouraging. Also, and I see a lot of people saying this on social media, and I agree, a little bit difficult to understand why there was no attempt to change the game from Nuno. So obviously there is no Lo Celso. Spurs are a little bit short of creative passing players on the bench, but Brian Gil was there, and Ndombele was available to use if and when there was a requirement to. If he's on the bench, he must be available. And yet, even though the die was cast in that game from probably about the first 20 minutes, it felt as if Spurs were just going to sit there and wait for something bad to happen. There was no obvious attempt to change it, either with a change of personnel or system, and now it's a bit confusing. So you wait and see. So maybe this is a anomaly. Maybe this is a kind of a bad experience that he learns from, or as per with Mourinho beforehand, it's this is my system. This is how I do things. We're going to do it this way, regardless of what happens. So let's park the Mourinho thing for a little bit and let's see which direction they head in from this point. I think, but abysmal, absolutely abysmal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, Leeds 0. 3 Liverpool. I figured obviously, the main thing to take away from this game was the Harvey Elliott injury. Excuse me, I can't say anyone's name today. Harvey Elliott's injury, which was very, very unfortunate. I think was very nasty. 18 years old. It's a shame, isn't it? It's a real shame because he looked like. I mean, he's been fantastic so far this season. He looked like he actually would. He would go on to have a good season. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, he looked like he was on a trajectory towards the England team, actually the senior England team, because I think he's been really, really good and well ahead of schedule too, because people have spoken about Harvey Elliott for maybe 2 or 3 years. I think he made his debut for Fulham when he was either almost 16 or 16. I think he might have been 15. So I think he's the youngest Premier League player in their history before he moved to Liverpool. And here he is, and he looks like he reminds me a little bit of Pedri at Barcelona, just in the way that he sort of exists in that area of the pitch and how neat his touches are and how creative
he looks like the real deal, doesn't he?
Yeah, a brilliant player. And it was just there's a very, when an injury like that happens, you can tell how serious it is by the way that all the other players react to it and by the sort of the speed with which the medical staff respond. And you and I were actually talking on WhatsApp while this was happening, and we both kind of concluded that actually I'd probably watch something else, and I was going to go and watch an Inspector Morse, and you were going to Rocket League, which was a really
I went to watch Match of the Day. Thank you very much to do my research.
Okay. I remember your timeline being a little bit different. Anyway, we didn't do either of those things because the injury happened, and it's just horrible seeing a player in that much pain.
When you experience like a 18-year-old on that particular trajectory who has suffers that kind of injury, it's not just horrible because of the obvious pain and delay and sit on the sidelines associated. It's also because you worry that part of their progression that it might impact their ceiling. Do you know what I mean? Like in your experience of players at that age, you've had serious career-defining injuries. It can go wrong, can't it?
It can go wrong, and I mean, it can eventually go right again, but sometimes there's an awfully long time between that. There's a very, very protracted, long after the cast has come off and the full fitness has been regained, the player...
You miss out on those sort of like very, they describe the children, particularly under the age of 1, but also under the age of 5 as kind of absorbing information as if their brain is a sponge, and they learn in a way that adults don't. I sort of feel, I have no idea whether this is true or not, but I would imagine that, for players just joining senior football at that level, 16 to 20, those are extremely important years in terms of how you learn, what you learn, and what kind of player you will end up being, how that informs you. And I would have thought missing out on what I imagine will be at least the entire season for Harvey Elliott. I wonder what kind of impact that has on his future as a player.
I wonder if part of this is the pressure of the conversation, because I agree with you, and I imagine we're not the only two people sort of sitting here thinking, oh, I wonder if he'll ever be the same again, or I wonder if this will be to him what a similar kind of injury was to Eduardo or Aaron Ramsey.
Yeah.
And so when he comes back, and I don't know enough about the recovery from, have we actually had a diagnosis yet? Seemed like a broken ankle, presumably. Or
I don't know. I haven't looked.
Okay, so we don't even have a diagnosis of the nature of the break, or the nature of the recovery period and how long it's going to be. But as soon as he sets back on a Premier League pitch, there's going to be this sort of unspoken thing. People watch him going, oh, his touch isn't quite good, and maybe he's lost a yard of pace. So we're all going to be looking for symptoms of permanent damage.
Or also basing it on a kind of
difficult.
collective memory, our perception of what he was as a player beforehand, which is probably wrong anyway, right?
So which is to be honest, for most of us, like he had a very good season at Blackburn last year even. But our experience of him, for most people, is probably about 4 games.
Certainly it is for me.
Yeah, and I'm presuming you didn't watch all 90 minutes of all of those games, so it's even less than that. Exactly. So it's a tiny sample, and you and I have sat here and we've anointed him. He's this great talent. He's Pedri, according to me. All this kind of stuff. And now
he's the real deal.
He's the real deal, you said. And so in 6 months, a year's time, when he returns, he's got this incredibly high bar to live up to, with all of the mental baggage that comes with a really
take it back then. He's rubbish. I hope he never comes back.
Really bad. No, don't say that.
No, that's reverse psychology. By saying that, what I actually am saying is that I want him to come back better than ever.
No, but that's not reverse psychology. That just sounded vengeful. Like you wish him that his career is over.
Well, I didn't mean it that way. I was trying to. I thought by saying the opposite of what I meant, I'd get what I want.
You outthought yourself, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, anyway, all of Tifo's best wishes to Harvey Elliott. I hope he does make a lovely recovery. He's been fun to watch over the last few weeks. So, best of luck. Good wishes.
Get better soon.
Get better soon. Oh yes, the other person we were going to discuss as it relates to this game is Mo Salah, because he scored a goal, and that was his 100th goal in the Premier League, Seb. He is the 30th player to do so. There you go. He's scored some goals. The conversation we had about him yesterday at the time, was it yesterday? I have no idea what it was. It is.
Yesterday, but in podcast world, it was Sunday.
2 days ago. You're right, on Sunday. I need to say on Sunday.
On Sunday.
The conversation we had about him on Sunday related to sort of the best player in the world, air quotes, conversation. And I asked you, do you think perhaps he's a little bit like a player like Ribéry or Modric? You said Kaka, a player who by no means is the best player in the world, air quote, but perhaps for a period of time within their career, definitely could be considered that in a small moment. Do you know what I'm saying? Is he one of those players? How will he be remembered is what I'm asking.
Oh, well, I think he's entwined with Liverpool winning the Champions League, Liverpool winning the Premier League. So I think in time, if you look back on this in 20 or 30 years, I think his legacy will be much more substantial than just guy who was fleetingly very, very good or, among the very best players in the world. The term I think I'd use is most valuable, because I think if you took him away from that Liverpool side, certainly during the year when they were runners up in the Champions League, when they lost to Real Madrid and he of course got injured in the final, I think him as talisman, him as player that defenses didn't quite know what to do with, because he attained a level that he'd never really reached before in his career that year. He'd been a very, very good player at Fiorentina, had some good moments at Roma too, didn't have a great time at Chelsea, of course, but he was a different caliber of player to the one we presumed he could be. And that was very, very powerful.
Just clicked, didn't it?
Yeah, he really did. And it was just part of the story. And Liverpool survived in that season with a lot of momentum. They played some brilliant football, of course, and but they were so powerful, and it felt as if it was something about more than just the sum of the 11 players they had on the pitch. And Salah was head of that queue, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Who was on your list though? Because you got Kaka out of me, but then you.
Well, my list was like a player like Ribéry, who constantly sort of flirted with that title. But obviously, the elephant in the room is that these players all exist in the realm of Ronaldo and Messi, which obviously. I
think I prefer Robin to Ribéry in that conversation.
Sure, Robin and Ribéry though they're the same. They're the same.
Because I think Aaron Robin was the better player. Like Ribéry, I feel like, okay, put it this way. The joke people always make about Aaron Robin is that he did the same thing every time, and it was the same goal with the same technique, and yet no one could ever stop it. And I feel like that's he was a very, very destructive player in an era without Ronaldo and Messi. I think we pay more attention to Robin.
I absolutely agree. I think that's probably true.
And anyway. I think. Anyway, okay, you want to...
I just wanted to say, I like what they do in America with the MVP thing, the most valuable. I think that's cool, because the most valuable player isn't always the best player, right?
Hey, did you, over the weekend, did you see the Carolina Panthers' new... I don't know how to describe it. They've got like a digital panther that jumps around the stadium. Did you see that? That was terrifying.
I don't understand that. If you're in the stadium, you can't see that.
No, of course not. But
no,
it's still quite
that sounded
frightening.
stupid when I said it out loud. I just wanted to double check that it wasn't like some kind of special hologram or something. It is augmented reality for TV viewers.
My understanding is it's TV viewers.
Also, the panther appeared to grow much larger on the field,
more aggressive. Like it wasn't. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't good for my morale. It was sort of, I want to turn the television off now.
Yeah, I was frightened. So, I thought all of those poor Americans, they're all going to be killed by this enormous panther.
They weren't. They survived. But I saw that on Twitter, and 5 minutes later, I was watching the Gladbach Bielefeld game on the Zone, and when Gladbach scored, Lars Stindl scored a really nice headed goal, and went to the crowd, and then Gladbach's mascot, which is just this, it's not quite as high tech as the Carolina Panther. Panther just comes into shot. It's just a horse's head, like the old fashioned, the old fashioned pantomime horse. He just comes in and he's got his big toothy grin. So
are there two persons operating?
It seemed like one. It didn't seem big enough to be two, and it was it didn't walk around on 4 legs. So
it was like BoJack Horseman.
Exactly, but lo-fi. So the contrast was quite fitting between US sport and European sport. Yeah, it was. Well,
I like a fake horse. I've always loved a fake horse.
Yeah.
Some of the most fun horses out there are fake ones.
And talking of the Panthers' ferocity, I don't like mascots that are too cheerful.
Sure.
Because some mascots they have that big inane grin, which I really hate. So I want to.
No, I like those because they look sad to me.
Well, the smiley ones, you feel like there's a
because the thing is, if you have a fixed expression on a mascot, anything that's created out of wool, I don't know what they're made of, wool, polystyrene, sort of felt. You know what I'm saying? Like a big mascot's head, a woolen head. The point I'm saying is there's a tricky balance in the eyes. You got to get the eyes right, because you know how people say you can smize at someone. Do you know what smizing is? When you smile at someone without actually smiling, it's a technique. It's supposed to be a kind of sexy thing that people do to each other. They smize each other. It's all in the eyes. But I think with mascots,
can you demonstrate what that might look like, please?
I can't do it. That's the problem. I can't smize. Anyway, for listeners, that would be horrific. I've tried my best. I'm sorry. It's very difficult to get the eyes right, because you have to get the smile in the eyes. And often what happens with mascots, and particularly children's woolen characters. Not woolen. I know they're not made of wool. I don't know what they're made of. At Disneyland, for example, they look vacant and sad with their big grin, but they're dead eyes. And that's my favorite thing about lots of those football mascots. You know, the I don't know.
The expression in the eyes?
Yeah, I was trying to think of one. What is one?
Well, that St. Johnson one, which is just a big scary sun.
Fred the Red.
Fred the Red. Gunnosaurus. Chirpy.
Gunnosaurus, they've got the eyes right with Gunnosaurus. Gunnosaurus just looks kind of cheeky. I like Gunnosaurus. Anyway, this is we've got so much to get through. But it's all in the eyes. Anyway, we'll be back after this short break. We're back. And now we're going to touch on Manchester United 4-1 Newcastle. Of course, the big story from this game was Ronaldo's return and a brace. But a lovely goal from Bruno Fernandes, Seb. What a delight.
It's one of those goals, I always love watching the expressions of the people behind the goal. And there's a really good angle of that Fernandes goal where you see, because he releases the shot really quickly and it moves so quickly towards the top corner. Yeah. And there's a couple of people behind the goal that if you look at them, they made that really obvious mistake of forgetting there's a net between them and the ball. And you can see them. Yeah, it's one of my favourites. Yeah. Excellent goal.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, really nice.
Yeah. I like the way it moved in the air. I thought I didn't like the way that Newcastle left him completely alone just outside the 18-yard box. But it's nice to know he can do it because he does take a lot of shots from that area and normally is much closer to a defender or is being closed down. But, you know, one of the fun things about Bruno Fernandes is that Manchester United appear to just encourage him to take as many risks as possible, which makes them quite a fun team to watch. But it also means you watch him give the ball away and miss a lot. So when he gets it right, it's lovely.
Feels like the reward for all the frustration. No, because you have to... I think this is an age where we get a little bit... we're probably guided a bit too much by ball dispossessions and pass accuracy and those kind of things because they're useful in the right context, but also there still has to be a place for players that have a license to take risks because that's what they're on the pitch to do. They're supposed to be the expressive side of the team, and that's why obviously one of the tedious conversations about Man United is the absence of a convincing defensive midfield. But this is part of the conversation too, is because you need to be able to accommodate the players that do take risks, do lose the ball, sometimes give it away in areas where it's not ideal to do so, and that's part of the need for a resilient defensive midfield. But yeah, when you get to see a shot like that, and I thought it was nice because obviously the conversation around Saturday's game with Newcastle was very boring and very focused on one player, and it was excessive, I felt. And also a lot of it came at the cost of Bruno. We spoke last week in the podcast about how's he gonna, I don't know, did I just do an impression of myself there?
You sort of did, yeah.
That was kind of weird because it was me who led the charge against him, and now I'm applying like my chemistry teacher voice to myself. Interesting. Anyway, it was nice to see him respond with something like that, which is one of the best goals he scored for Man United, which is lovely moment.
Also nice to see Jesse Lingard get a goal.
Sure.
Back on the Manchester United score sheet after being on loan last season at West Ham. He had a fantastic season there. It was unclear in the summer whether or not he was going to leave. I think there were times where the club were open to it and times where they weren't. But you sort of think perhaps in this setup, maybe not so good for Van der Beek, but he could get goals this season, couldn't he? He could have a good season from the bench.
Yeah, I wonder. He definitely could. I just wonder whether it's right for him to be having the good season from the bench part of his career at this age, because he's in his late 20s now. And
I wish he'd gone to West Ham, for sure.
Me too.
I really wish that had happened.
He's got a World Cup in just over a year. Difficult to see him making a 23-man squad, even though he was involved in the last one, I understand. But over 13, 14 months, eventually someone like, I don't know, we spoke about Conor Gallagher earlier. Yeah. Someone like that is going to come back into prominence. So I don't know. I'm not sure it's the greatest decision. I still think he'll leave in January. I still think he'll go somewhere because he has to play. Yeah,
it's nice to watch him every week.
Well, he's too good a player just to be Van der Beek on the Man United bench.
For sure.
That was quite clever.
That was good.
That was quite clever. Yeah.
Manchester United, of course, top of the league. at the moment.
Well done me.
11 goal. Well done you. 11 goals scored. Pogba, I believe, with 2 more assists in this game, I believe he's on 7 assists now. I think the record in the Premier League for a season is 18. I think that is Fabregas.
Kevin De Bruyne?
I think it's Fabregas. It's possible that Kevin De Bruyne broke that record and I've missed that. But he's not far off, halfway there already. No, if he could have an incredible assisting season. It could be a record breaker here.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it actually, because when you see a goal like Bruno's, obviously Pogba laid off the ball for him there. There's always someone always does that funny thing on YouTube where, like, you forget the goal bit of it and you just highlight the assist. Someone did it for Tom Carroll with that Gareth Bale goal at West Ham years and years ago. It was like a 3-yard just layoff, no press, no pressure, nobody trying to take the ball off him. And they sort of put that into slow motion, then fast forwarded the bit where Gareth Bale rattled it into the top corner from 35 yards. But it's actually a really good identification of space. I know that what we want to see from Pogba is that kind of raking 40-yard ball, which has a bit of backspin on it, checks on the surface and hits a player in stride. But he's becoming better at just shuffling players into position.
Yeah,
and his short-range passing is a lot better than people give him credit for. It's not as eye-catching, and it's not as good for highlight reels, and
it's decision making though, isn't it? Like
exactly.
He passes to the right person at the right time, even if it is, because I think probably half of his assists so far are little passes inside to someone who then scores a great goal. But that's just as important.
Well, this is actually a thing with Jadon Sancho. So people always, before they probably watched him too much, they celebrated his stats and his assist numbers. A lot of those, some of them came from really intricate bits of play. A lot of them were very simple, though. A lot of them were just about when to release the ball and who to release it to, and really basic parts of the game, like passing and moving. And that's what Pogba's doing. Like, we know what else he's got in his locker. I don't, that goes without saying. But just because it's a simple looking pass, it's a really important part of the game, particularly for a player playing in that position. So it's really nice to see. And one of my favourite things is watching players change the conversation around them. Yeah. And the Paul Pogba topic for a really long time has been so dull and so aggressive and so overblown and silly. And this season he's just been quietly excellent. And I almost quite like the fact that he's racking up these stats without doing the expressive, flamboyant things that he's capable of, because it's just it's kind of workmanlike excellence, to coin a phrase that won't catch on.
Do you think also that the arrival of Ronaldo and obviously Bruno Fernandes, Paul Pogba, takes quite a lot of pressure off of Jadon Sancho, who I didn't watch this game. I only watched it on Match of the Day, and he wasn't involved in too many of the highlights. But when he was, he looked sharper than he had done in his first couple of games. He hasn't had the brightest or the best start, and clearly needs a bit of time to settle in. It takes the pressure off a little bit, doesn't it? I feel like the eyes of the world, at least the eyes of Manchester United fans, aren't on him at the moment. And maybe he can slowly improve throughout the season and catch people by surprise a little bit later without having all of that pressure that he would have done if Ronaldo hadn't arrived.
No, well, let me turn around. I mean, I know you didn't watch the game, but you didn't go into the weekend interested to see what Jadon Sancho would do. And that's really the point you're making, in that he can exist in the shadows a little bit, which is a really strange thing to say about someone that costs 75 million quid and has his reputation and is probably one of the best young players in the world. But undoubtedly, because you're never going to be the centre of attention now. I mean, I don't know how long Ronaldo's contract is, but for as long as he's there, this is what happens.
2 years, I think.
Oh, well, 2 years. Well, every club he's been to since he left Manchester United, he has existed at the top of the news cycle. Everybody else has been a kind of support actor. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. That is how it is, and that's how it will be for Man United. And I think that's even true for someone like Paul Pogba. Because the conversation isn't really about him anymore either, which is going to be beneficial. People start wondering, he's done something interesting with hair. What does that mean about his game? Well, nothing, but I'm going to pretend otherwise. That stuff has gone, because the type of people who write those things, who want the attention from it, well, there's no better source of attention than Cristiano Ronaldo at the moment. Hey, Joe, it's not really a segue, but I've got an interesting point to make about a European-based football match. Can I monologue about it a little bit? This is me trying to seize control of the running order.
Yeah, go ahead. What, you mean you're cutting out Watford, Wolves, Brentford, Brighton, Leicester City, Man City, Arsenal, Norwich, Chelsea, Villa?
Don't care about any of that.
Well, we will be talking about some of that after this break. Go on, we're back from the break. You can do your European bit now, and then we'll go back and do some more. Because I want to reference some of these games at least. We got time. We got nothing, nowhere to go. No one's here.
I've got two little points to make, two little things that I
Do you want to save them to the end?
No, I want to do them now in the meat of the podcast. It feels like this is.
I'm so sorry, listeners. Off you go, Seb.
The penalty Leverkusen conceded. In that situation, I think most people accept that a defender, short of just turning around and punching the forward in the face, is not going to concede a free kick. You can pretty much do anything. So in this situation, Marco Reus was trying to get around the side of the defender, and he sort of flung his arm out to protect the ball, but struck Reus in the face. Completely accidentally, he wasn't attempting to, and probably a yard from the goal line, and then the ball went out. Referee went to VAR, or VAR intervened. He ended up giving a penalty. It's the first time I think I've ever seen an offence given for something like that, barring something ridiculous like a rugby tackle or an elbow or whatever. So penalty for Dortmund. The second thing, and we brought this up probably about 6 months ago as something we'd like to fix about the game, time wasting. So the end of Espanyol, Atletico Madrid, Espanyol probably from maybe 70 minutes onwards had done a pretty good job of winding down the clock and taking as long as possible over every stoppage. And they got to the 89th minute, player went down with cramp, ended up being down with cramp for probably about 2.5 minutes. Referee adds 10 minutes of injury time, and he is my new personal hero. And the sting of the tail, of course, is that Thomas Lemar scores in the 9th minute of those 10 minutes of injury time to win Atletico the game.
Wow.
And this is a wonderful moment of football karma, justice. It's referees of Spain look upon this. This is how you deal with it.
Yeah. Referees around the world, indeed.
Well, no, because referees around the world, yes, but I think it's a particular problem in Spain because there is. Manuel Pellegrini actually talked about this in pre-season. He talked about how slow the game is, how much cheating there is towards the end of it, how referees need to be more judicious in adding on added time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And this was its perfect emblem. And also I really enjoyed because this was at Espanyol, so it was in Barcelona, and when the 10-minute board went up, the crowd are absolutely outraged. And the irony being that in the foreground, there was one of their players feigning cramp on the side of the pitch, sort of, yeah. So,
what they should do? They should just do a 60-minute clock that stops every time the play isn't happening.
Don't need to do it. You just add it on properly.
It would just remove all of the problems. Just get rid of them.
I don't know. Like I don't want to interfere with the structure of the game or the continuous clock, but it's just a frustration. I can deal with the ball being in play for maybe 65 minutes only, just as long as when you get into injury time or when you approach injury time, a referee applies common sense. If it takes a goal kick, if it takes a goalkeeper 90 seconds to restart the game with a goal kick, add on the time. Like 10 minutes.
Do you remember we made a time wasting video a few years ago, and there was an example from the Premier League of the lowest actual game time played in a game.
42 minutes, I think.
42 minutes. It had Cardiff in there, was it?
Burnley against Cardiff.
It was something like that.
Yeah.
42 minutes of actual football in a 90-minute game. It's stunning, isn't it?
Scandalous.
Stunning.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, listen. Let's head back to the UK to discuss Chelsea 3-0 Aston Villa. Now, Chelsea is a relatively interesting one because, as I understand it, although I didn't pay close attention to the game, as evidenced by the fact that I was accidentally watching a different game for 2 minutes.
I feel like that's an anecdote that you should relay.
No, I won't do that. But that was just for you. Lukaku, 2 shots, 2 goals, everything we've come to expect from him. I'm sure we'll be talking about him a lot this season, so there's probably no need to delay here. Chelsea generally looking, like champion contenders, of course. 9 goals and 1 conceded in 4 games so far. We will, again, probably be talking about that a lot this season. The one thing I did want to mention was that 3-0 very much flattered Chelsea in this game. Aston Villa were very good, according to Greg Evans, who wrote the lovely piece for The Athletic that I read this morning. In their 3-5-2, apparently Thomas Tuchel admitted after the game that at times they struggle to deal with Aston Villa's pressing. And I wondered, two things. Firstly, whether this is presumably this is good news for Aston Villa. As Greg wrote, it is infrequent that a team, coming back from an away game having lost 3-0 brings lots of encouragement home with them, which clearly Aston Villa did in this case. But secondly, I wonder, and I'm probably getting carried away, but I wonder, could this be a watershed moment for Chelsea? Could this be the kind of Arsenal versus Conte's Chelsea, where another team finally kind of cracked how to not dominate, but how to contest with Chelsea's system? Could it be something that other teams take a lead from?
Don't know about that, because that Conte moment was a bit more dramatic, because they obviously lost that game and they were a little bit humiliated, and it involved Conte ripping up the system and going to his back three. I think it's really more about Villa, because I thought Edouard Mendy was Chelsea's best player. I think it was his best game for Chelsea, certainly, let's put it that way. And save for a really good Thiago Silva block and an excellent Mendy save from, I think Ollie Watkins was the block, and the save was from Tyrone Mings after a corner. Villa created the better chances. It was just I felt like it was a lesson. It was that when all aspiring teams are growing into their new position in the league, they have that game where they play really well and yet somehow they end up losing 3-0, and weirdly it seems always to happen at Stamford Bridge. But this was a kind of, right, this is, obviously you need to take chances, but also you need to retain your focus, and really what to settle that game was mental mistakes. Good goal from Lukaku to start scoring, but then the Tyrone Mings mistake, his sort of hacked back pass back to his goalkeeper, it happens just after half time. I think most Villa fans during the break would have said, okay, but this is fine, like 1-0 down, but creating the better chances, and as long as we don't concede, then it's chance going to keep coming. But that sort of killed the game, and so it's a little bit of a lesson about concentration. It's also about what happens in a game if you create chances but you don't take them. You can't have a sort of you can't have 10 minutes of self-pity basically, and you can't have sort of the downturns that Villa did. But they were great, and they it's good, because I in the summer when you see a club's transfer activity and you think, oh, you're going to be interesting next season, and you are, I can't wait to watch them. It's actually really rare that a team fulfills that promise, because most often it's kind of like, oh, that guy gets injured, and that new signing turns out to be a little bit bollocks, and blah blah blah, and it's the same old. The team ends up being exactly the same as the one it was. And in Villa, you've definitely seen like a change in personality,
and Palace, I think, as well, right?
And Palace, definitely Palace. You've had a change in composition. Also, I think there's a change in the way people view Palace's future because of how young some of the players they brought in are, and they are now on that list of teams that if you're a neutral and you're sitting down on a Saturday, oh yeah, I'll put that on because I want to see Easy, or I want to see Elise, or I want to see Conor Gallagher play. They're in that category now, and I think for different reasons Villa are too. And they 3-0's a bit humbling, but I think they gave a pretty good account of themselves. Okay. I don't think there's going to be any major panic from Chelsea. I think Mason Mount didn't start the game. He's a big part of what they do. I think
Saul started, of course.
Saul, that's a really interesting one, because I saw the comparisons with Bakayoko, who of course had a terrible time at Chelsea before going out on loan for goodness knows how long. I mean, I think he's gone back to AC Milan, and it's gone back for 2 years, and it's his 6th loan, I think, since he joined from Monaco. And people compared the Saul performance in the first half to the Bakayoko one against, I forget who the team was, but he ended up getting sent off in that game.
Yeah.
I think you have to be sympathetic. Look, Saul, better players than Saul have come to England and struggle with the pace, particularly in the centre midfield, and particularly against teams who press really intensely. And Villa had a plan for him, let's be honest. And it was one of those where I think it's difficult, because as soon as Tuchel takes him off at half time, he becomes a story. And it becomes, he puts himself on one of those lists, which he turns up periodically about worst ever debut, or this is etc. But I think it's the kindest thing to do, because if Chelsea go on to lose that game and it's as a result of being overrun in midfield, then the conversation's a lot worse, and the damage might just be terminal. And as it is, you can kind of write it off as just a bit of adjustment. It was hard to watch at times, though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's Chelsea and Aston Villa. Next up, Arsenal 1-0 Norwich. Arsenal win a game. Fantastic. Finally scored a goal. And they look pretty decent in behind Norwich. Quick and direct. As Ian Wright said on Match of the Day, though, people will say it's Norwich. It is Norwich. But most interestingly, Seb, Arteta described in his post-match interview, he described the last sort of 10 to 14 days, I suppose, the international break, as the best of his career. And can you contextualise that for me a little bit? Because I realise I've taken it out of context ever so slightly. Not in terms of the results, not in terms of the... But I believe he was saying it in terms of... he said he looked around the club and saw the people that are working there, the quality of the players that they have, and the kind of... I think he was attempting to describe a sort of collective or a unity, feeling of unity. The best 14 days of his career. Not to put the boot in at all. I was just very interested to see him respond in that way. Now, you're smiling as though you're going to be cynical about it. That's not why, just to be clear, to be 100% clear, that's not why I brought it up. I thought it was interesting that was his response. He seems like someone who is tackling things head on.
Do you remember that conversation about how eyes are important? See, when you say you're not cynical, you did your cynical eyes. I know you're cynical eyes because I see them in every...
They're always there.
We have a meeting every day and exactly those. Hey, so it's not that I'm going to be cynical about it. It's a little bit of a Guardiolaism. It's right. You know how he's prone occasionally to these sort of these moments which are intended to puff up his players and his organisation and his team. It's just one of those. And but winning is winning. There's no such thing as it's only Norwich. But you won the game. Sure. That's all that really matters. And also there was a couple of good moments in there. Nicola Pepe created the goal in a slightly sort of jumbled, bizarre way. There's a fabulous tackle by I think Gabriel at the end, which denied Timo Pukki because Norwich could easily have taken a point.
Yeah, they weren't bad. Norwich weren't bad.
Can you imagine if Arsenal had failed to win that game? I mean, the conversation around them before the international break was pretty toxic. If you don't beat Norwich at home, that's difficult. Yeah,
Uncle absolutely. Damien was there in the crowd. He would have been disappointed, but at least he didn't have far to go home.
That's an easy trip back to the Old Red Lion Theatre pub, which is a really good venue for watching football.
You can walk. You can walk to the Old Red Lion Theatre pub from the Emirates, and you can watch all of the good football there. The Old Red Lion Theatre, where football is good. Now, Norwich have conceded 11 goals and they've scored 1 goal. That's not a good start. They're bottom of the table, of course, after 4 games. Nil points. Only Newcastle have conceded more. Here's more. Obviously, Seb, they've lost Buendia, but they did have, they have spent this summer. They brought in lots of players. I won't mention them all here, but we've got Josh Sargent, we've got Rashika Kabak, also Gilmore and Brandon Williams on loan too. So in some ways,
as well. It's a good player.
In some ways, it's like quite a different team, I suppose, to the one that was promoted last season. Too early to tell, I imagine, what fate holds for them this season because of those first 4 games. Arsenal, Leicester, Man City, and Liverpool were the teams that they played, which you cannot really imagine a worse start in terms of fixtures for a team like Norwich. So you would kind of expect them to be on 0 points after those 4 games.
Yeah, and also, do you remember last season how Fulham arrived back in the division and then they had a big splurge on players? Not the first time they did it when it was a disaster. Last season when they brought in a lot of loan players. They changed their entire defence and their goalkeeper within the space of 10 days. And we all got a little bit nervous for them and it looked very chaotic for probably about 6 weeks. And then all of a sudden they started to improve.
Yeah.
And it'd be a better story. And then they got relegated. It would be a better story if they'd survived, but they did improve. And maybe had the season gone on for a few more months, they might have survived. I see Norwich kind of in there. I think let's hold back. So. Let's just leave them alone for a little bit and see what happens in November.
You kind of have to wonder, if it doesn't work this season, what else do you have to try? Because last time they tried keeping the core of the team together. They didn't spend loads of money. They kept Buendia, of course. They kept Pukki, and they came up and they tried to do the same thing they did in the Championship with the same roster of players, and it didn't quite work. Again, they played some very good football, but they were porous at the back, conceded many goals, and deservedly went down. This time, they clearly have spent money. I think their net spend is somewhere around 25, but overall they spent about £50 million. That's not a very Norwich thing to do, So clearly they are making an attempt to strategize differently ahead of this season. I guess it's just always going to be complicated when the first 4 fixtures of those 4 teams. Presumably the club will have
budgeted
is the wrong word, but budgeted to not get any points out of those games.
No, I think that's exactly the right word. I would have thought so. Or there would have been a conversation somewhere within the club at some point where maybe the sporting director or the manager said, this is what's likely to happen. Nobody have a tantrum or nobody get disheartened by it and that seems especially to be the case because a lot of their transfer activity happened quite late in the window. They didn't do everything in early June and then sit on it for the rest of the summer. They did it late as if they were looking towards October and November, and that's fine because no one gets relegated at the end of September. So, and also like the difference between people always get nervous when a team has a lot of churn during summer, when there's a lot of turnover and a lot of change to a side that have won promotion, because players get put out of, players have their ego damaged because they've contributed to the promotion, they've won a league, they've achieved all the success, and then somebody comes in on bigger wages and takes their place, and that's a really awkward dynamic in a football club. But you don't see Norwich making a lot of those kind of signings. It's just adding to what they've got. So, Josh Sargent, not a high-profile player. Matthias Norman, not a high-profile player. These are good players. There's a guy from the French league, a midfielder, whose name I have completely forgotten. He's got a hyphenated first name, which is, unusual.
That is unusual.
It's like if you were called Joe Alex Devine.
Well, goodness me, I'd be better at tactics, but less funny. Now listen,
you have much more cynical eyes.
I would.
And a cynical mouth.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes now of a Norwich Championship player who perhaps was part of the team that went down a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got promoted to the Premier League that other time, and my wages like doubled.
Yeah.
And then I got relegated, and my wages halved. And I'm thinking, hey, if Billy Gilmore can come and help me stay up, or if any number of these rivals can help me stay up, I won't have to have my wages halved again. I like it.
Okay, but then also put yourself in the shoes of that player. He's come up, he's scored a couple of goals at championship level. And he thinks, good season here, and I might get myself a move to Everton.
Yeah.
But
well, I'd never do that. I'd be completely loyal to Norwich,
of course. That's how you are, of course.
Because Norwich is the best city in the UK outside of London, and is the nicest place to live outside of London.
20
and
loyalty. Okay.
It's the best football club outside of London. So there you go. It's exciting. That doesn't work, that one.
That was, that was just a way of you talking about your loyalty and your commitment, which is...
It was.
Moving
on now. Leicester City 0-1 Manchester City. Two teams that have both beaten Norwich so far. Leicester had their chances in this game, Seb. It was a tight affair.
No, I found it disappointing. I got bored. I watched it, but I got bored.
Tight affairs can sometimes be boring.
Yeah, just I had it down as the best game of the weekend, and it was okay. But
you were wrong.
I was wrong. I was wrong. Hey, so one thing I did like, Leicester were pretty good at times. They've got this really fun dynamic between Jamie Vardy and Harvey Barnes, which didn't see at the end of last season because obviously Harvey Barnes got hurt. But it capitalises on like Vardy's tendency of escaping down the right and being an available target in the channel and using his pace to try and get around the corner, the edges of a defence. And when that's happening, Barnes is typically stretching the fullback on the other side of the pitch. And it's kind of a crossing, cut-back kind of routine that they've got. Nearly created 2 goals at the weekend. Harvey Barnes, I feel like he's one of those players that, if he looks slightly different, he's in a bit of a Paul Scholes category. He's not as extreme an example, but if he
looks quite nice.
He looks nice. He looks like, when you're creating a player on Pro Evolution Soccer and you have your default, like the guy, you're just your every man before you start, doing your proper hair. He looks like Harvey Barnes originally.
Well, that's what they say about Keanu Reeves, isn't it? Have I said this before?
No.
One of the theories about Keanu Reeves and why he's such a fantastic screen presence is because he is essentially a blank canvas onto which the audience place their desires. Because if you think about Keanu Reeves, he doesn't really change his acting approach very often. And listen, I love him. I think he's great. I love The Matrix and I love John Wick. This isn't a dig on Keanu Reeves. I think he's doing this on purpose.
Is clearly the best Keanu Reeves film.
Sure, but
I'm FBI agent Bodhi.
But even when he shoots into the sky and screams no, he's still kind of blank when he's doing that. And I think there is true, like the audience watch him and you're sort of looking at a little blank canvas. And whatever you think, whatever your interpretation of his emotional state is, that's what it is, because there's nothing there to contradict you. And that's why he's such an impressive screen presence. And now it sounds a little bit like that's what you're saying about Harvey Barnes. I mean, actually nothing like that at all, but something in that realm.
I'm kind of mentally listing my favourite scenes from Point Break. I've completely forgotten about Harvey Barnes.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
When he jumps out of the airplane without a parachute and catches Patrick Swayze on the way down.
Oh yeah,
it's a great moment in cinema history.
You've got to do that.
Yeah,
you've got to do that. Yeah. Incidentally, Patrick Swayze. Every time I think about Patrick Swayze, all I can think about is his character in Donnie Darko with the dungeon under his house. Do you know what I mean? Like I know Patrick Swayze is much more famous for other things, but speaking of smiling faces and vacant eyes, that character is anyway. Man City scored the kind of shit goal that champions score, didn't they, to win games like this?
Charmless, boring, efficient. In it went. Brilliant. Yeah.
Fine.
Nobody won any fancy football points.
Moving on. Yeah. Exactly. Fine.
Get out.
In which case we shall move on to Brentford 0, 1 Brighton. We can carry on, right? It's just us. We'll just carry on. Let's get this done.
Can this count as the editorial meeting? I mean,
sure. Why not? Okay.
I feel like I have that's cool. Okay.
Well, Brentford 0-1 Brighton. Brentford 5 points from 4 games, Seb. They haven't won again since they beat Arsenal on the opening day. But they look a little bit class. Lots of opportunities in this game particularly. They were great.
They were great.
They're exciting to watch still. And if they can keep up the form, they'll definitely stay up. There are definitely 3 or more teams in the league that at the moment are much worse than Brentford, right?
Yeah, at the moment, yeah. What I would say is they were great, and a couple of parts of their game have surprised me. Like Ivan Toney is a little bit more creative as a player than I thought he would be at this level. Bryan Mbeumo is a bit more subtle. His touch survived the jump up. He's been very, very good. I'd say all that stuff, like it's a little bit of what's the positive equivalent of a hangover? Like a happy hangover.
So when you wake up in a good mood.
So if you wake up in a good mood, but you wake up in a good mood as a result of something exciting. So they win their promotion. They come to the league with all this confidence.
Christmas morning.
I don't really like Christmas. That's a bad example, but
Christmas morning if you liked Christmas and
Christmas morning if you like Christmas, and you wake up and you're all happy. Now in the Premier League, first night you beat Arsenal. More enthusiasm. I'm happier.
Yeah.
Really good Christmas. But then if you stop winning games or
January happens after Christmas.
I always think that does, and it's like eventually the morale drains away, because it's good to play well, and it's good to be able to say you play well when you didn't win, because that's kind of reassuring, but you don't want to play well and lose too often.
No, well, I mean, I guess the plus side is that they have drawn 2 games, they've won 1 game, and they've only lost 1 game. So, playing well and losing too often would only be a thing if one loss was too often.
Got to score some more goals.
Some more goals. Okay, well, that's Brentford. And I'm sure, again, we'll discuss Brentford a lot more this coming season. Brighton, however, currently 5th on 9 points, Seb. Wins over Burnley, Watford and Brentford. Curious I am to see them against one of the top 6, because, last season they sort of massively underperformed their XG. You felt that there was more to come from the team. They created a lot of opportunities that they just didn't finish, and they were what you were perhaps describing in your omen for Brentford.
They would have been Brentford last season. This would have happened to them last season, I think.
But this game, like 90-minute clutch goals, like Leandro Trossard's goal over the weekend, those things are super important. That felt like it was what Brighton were missing last season. I like them.
I feel like I've said everything I want to about the game. What the extra bit is, have you read on The Athletic about the rivalry between Matthew Benham and Tony Bloom? Hate each other.
Oh, Brentford and Brighton?
hate each other.
Only the owners of Brentford and Brighton, you're saying?
Yeah, they there's a feature in David Ornstein's column about this, and it's quite interesting. I won't spoil it. Go and have a read.
Was that this morning?
Yes.
No, do spoil it.
No.
I want to know.
You can read afterwards. You're already a subscriber. We don't care about you. You're in the Keep net already, so you're,
well, I guess maybe you can get that 30-day trial, huh?
Be worth it just for this anecdote.
Yeah, maybe.
So Tony Bloom watched the game from the stands, which is one of my favourite little sub-genres of interesting stuff that happened over the weekend.
Sure.
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watford 0, Wolves 2. Wolves finally scored some goals. Yeah?
Well,
I mean, the first was an own goal.
Yeah.
And the second was a sort of goal line scramble goal. But they all count.
They do.
And of course, the second goal was scored by a new signing, Hwang, which is exciting. The thing with Wolves is some crazy stat. I'm sure this is probably over-exaggerated, but I think it was something like 60 shots that they had from the first 3 games. And no goals. They really needed this one.
Yeah, they did. But in that sort of Brentford way, they've been playing pretty well. They played very well against Man United. They absolutely battered Spurs. Even
this
though
was
they lost to
coming.
them.
It was coming.
It was coming. And it was a really rotten Watford performance. But and the Watford goalkeeper actually made a couple of brilliant saves. But Hwang's a really interesting addition because he was at Salzburg.
Where did he come from? Salzburg?
Well, no, he was at Leipzig. He moved between the two clubs. But he kind of, people first became aware of him in that Erling Haaland season at Salzburg.
Right.
And he moved to Leipzig and didn't quite work for him. Like he didn't, I don't know whether it was a confidence thing or whether he didn't quite fit into the system, but he just didn't survive the kind of, they brought Andre Silva in over the summer and Hwang wasn't really going to fit between him and Dani Olmo. So,
I mean, he's not Portuguese, is he?
Hwang?
Yeah.
No.
What's he doing at Wolves? I'm confused. How did he get there?
All right, you're doing that. Okay, because that was weird for a bit. Like
I was saying I thought they only bought Portuguese players.
That's clever, but you didn't do your funny eyes. You didn't do your.
Sorry, my eyes are all confused now.
Yeah, I mean, no, he's not Portuguese, but he is good.
He looks good.
Yeah, he's not an outright number 9, so you'd expect that he would play in that little group behind Raul Jimenez.
Yeah.
God, that's a talented little group of 3 potentially.
He looks kind of stacked.
Yeah, I mean,
that's like with like 3 stacked forwards.
Do you mean stacked in the cool young person
stacked sense? Like a hench, like a built.
Don't.
Like what is illustrator Henry's always talking about getting lean.
Yeah. No, he's talking about getting hench. No.
Hench.
Yeah.
I don't know. Muscly. He looks muscly.
He looks like he can hold his own.
He looks like a big lad. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I don't think he's a big lad, but I think he's not
a broad lad.
I don't know. He's just a normal sized human being.
Is he? I swear to God, he's a big lad. Let me have a look.
I think he's only about 6 foot.
That's big.
Yeah, but you're like 6'14".
Yeah, but I know, but I'm too big. He is 177 meters. That is not true. He is 1.77 meters in feet.
So he's like 5'10", 5'11".
He's 5'8". I swear, I watched this.
So he's not a stacked hench lad of 6'5".
Let me look at a picture of him. No, I honestly, I
think you've got him confused with somebody else.
No, I haven't. I honestly haven't. I think what it is I must have seen him celebrate his goal next to a very small player. I think that must be it.
So maybe you saw him celebrate next to João Moutinho. João Moutinho is very short.
It might have been. It might have been that.
Trincão's quite short.
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of him now. I mean, he looks like he's got quite muscly arms.
Okay.
I don't know. The point I'm making is that the only close-up I saw of him on Match of the Day was when he was celebrating his goal and he was stood next to someone very small, which made him, you know how when you hold a tiny teacup and you say, I am a giant, it made him look like a giant. I'd never seen him before. But, obviously I'm wrong. 5'8". He's obviously not a big lad. I thought he was a big lad. Perspective. We're all learning things today.
Yeah. Good player. Not a big lad.
He's an average lad, Don. But yeah. Anyway, average lad. That's fine. That's the Premier League done, except for Southampton and West Ham, which was 0-0, and who cares about that?
No, don't care about that.
Oh, RB Leipzig, Bayern Munich, Seb. We're back to Europe. What happened here?
It was actually really disappointing. Leipzig were pretty chaotic, but if you're a Bayern Munich fan, which seems to account for like 60% of the people in Germany, then you'd have been happy because Leroy Sané has come back from international break looking great. One of the conversations at Munich has been
big lad, that guy.
About the big lad, Leroy Sané. Yeah. He hasn't had a great time since he moved from Manchester City, and he's been a little bit unconvincing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit strange. Well, good news, strange. That he should go off to international duty, work under Hansi Flick, his former Bayern Munich coach, and come back. And he played very efficiently. Like, he still has all the strengths that you associate with his game. So he's a very direct player, very skillful, very quick. But there's a little bit of efficiency which he showed in the win over Leipzig. If you look at the second goal that he created for Jamal Musiala, and the goal that he scored at the back post, capitalising on Musalia's work, suddenly he looks like a bit of a bargain at 40 million. And Munich looked really, really strong. It's a little bit discouraging because I think if you look at the recent trend in the Bundesliga and look at how competitive Leipzig have been, at least for about 60-70% of the season, that they got absolutely steamrolled by Bayern this early is not great news. Not great news for the competitiveness of the league, exactly. But very entertaining game, very good performance. Jamal Musiala is just a wonderful player. Like, if you get the chance, I know Sky Sports is starting to show the Bundesliga in England. They've taken the rights from BT Sport. Do watch him. I mean, he's going to be the one that got away from England for English football and for Gareth Southgate. Right. But
Florian Wirtz as well. I know we talked about the Leverkusen game before, but people were also saying over the weekend that they've lost Havertz, of course, but they've got Wirtz, and he
different kind of player. I mean,
a true great.
Future
great. True future great.
He's going to be a very classic sort of number 10. I wouldn't compare him to Havertz. I think they have sort of different abilities, but
I don't mean in the play style. I just mean in the quality level
of the game. Yeah, I would say so. Wirtz is one of the sort of the bright young things of German football, no doubt. Very good to watch. And Leverkusen lost over the weekend, but they look like they might be a pretty interesting, entertaining team this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would worry about Leipzig a little bit. They a little bit chaotic, and they've got within their Champions League group are Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah.
So
they got a tough old game on Wednesday. Wednesday they play Manchester City, I believe. Yeah. I was going to say, of course, Bayern Munich playing well this weekend. That's nice because they will be away to Barcelona on Tuesday. There's some big Champions League games midweek. This week. Yeah. Very exciting. Chelsea visit Zenit St. Petersburg. That's not one of the exciting ones. Young Boys host Manchester United. Also not one of the exciting ones. But on Wednesday, Manchester City, Leipzig. We've got Atletico Madrid, Porto. That's exciting. Liverpool, AC Milan. A big one. Inter Milan, Real Madrid too. And Besiktas Dortmund will be quite fun as well. So there's a lot going on.
Inter Milan are fun.
Football-wise, Inter Milan are fun.
Watched their game with Sampdoria over the weekend. They're 2-2. And not quite as mechanical and as organised as they were under Conte. They've also lost Hakimi and Lukaku, so any team would suffer. But they're playing pretty expressive football. Okay. So, yeah, watch that game.
There's a big game on Thursday too, Seb.
Which one's that?
It's Leicester-Napoli.
Ooh, that is
Leicester-Napoli at 8 p.m. on Thursday. That is exciting.
Juventus over the weekend as well, Napoli. So
who was Spurs playing?
Someone from France in the Europa, Mickey Mouse nonsense league.
Which one?
The Conference League.
Spurs are in the Conference League.
It's just so miserable.
You're playing Run.
Who could probably beat this Tottenham team, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Okay, before we finish, you wanted to talk a little bit about Real Madrid, Celta Vigo 5-2, Benzema hat-trick.
No, it was interesting to me because it was Real's first game back in the Bernabeu after, I think it's about 500 days. The game was sort of interesting. Celta that lead twice and Real Madrid came back.
Camavinga debut goal.
He a little bit of a sort of tap in, but still nice moment for him. There's a really weird statistic that Sid Lowe was reporting from the Spanish press because apparently one of the headlines in one of the Spanish dailies was that he was like the 27th youngest scorer for Real Madrid in history or something. Like, why would you work that out? Like, if you looked it up and you know he's not in the top 5, why would you keep going? Anyway.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Someone has to, but it's not you.
So the new Bernabeu will be completely finished, I think, for the start of next season. And apparently, you might have to look this up and check it, but the new roof, which will be retractable, is the same weight as like 21 jumbo jets.
Wow. That's heavy.
Those aren't your interested eyes.
No, the reason is because I was thinking, I didn't realise that they were rebuilding.
They're not rebuilding it, they're remodeling
it. 500 days. Yeah, no, but I hadn't noticed, having watched Real Madrid several times in the last 500 days, that they were never playing at the Bernabeu. But
they were playing at their mini stadium, the Di Stefano Stadium, which is very different. Although it, from a certain camera angle, could probably look the same, and also because there were no fans in, I guess you could...
Maybe.
But also in the new Bernabeu will have, not that I'm kind of working with the tourist board, have an underground 5-story car park.
Oh.
Which is like not that interesting until you think about kind of the engineering achievement of actually building that under a stadium.
I wonder how many car parking spaces that is exactly.
5. Don't know.
Were you trying to do multiplication in your head before realizing that you only had one of the numbers? No,
because I would have had I would have had some trouble with the multiplication, but I don't know what the average size of a car park level is, or how many spaces one.
I actually don't know either. I really don't know.
There's our Monday afternoon. There is our Monday afternoon.
Someone would know. It would be someone's job to know the average size of a car park. It'll be Alex a city planner.
No, that's the kind of thing that Alex spends his time off looking up, I reckon.
It is the kind of thing he would know. Do you know that Alex reads Shipping Weekly or whatever it's called? And he's got these like monthly shipping subscriptions, magazines. And he reads they're basically commercial magazines, industry magazines about industrial shipping, commercial shipping. He brought one to work the other day, and
sacked him.
Interesting. I sacked him. Very interesting. People's interests. There we go.
Can I tell the story about you in the graveyard?
In the graveyard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. You can tell it. What is it?
Well, no, I mean, we were having a conversation during your last period of time off, and the one time I talked to you, you messaged back saying, I'll call you back in a little bit, and then you took a picture of a grave.
I'm in a graveyard with my mother.
Your mum had come to stay, so you had a little bit of a, just
we went to Highgate Cemetery, of course.
When you told me that afterwards, it wasn't as
lovely
funny.
Spot.
Don't
you know what?
The kind of,
it
makes it sound more normal, which is not the point of the story.
No, because the thing is, unless you said it was just a random, it sounds like I'm visiting a dead person in a cemetery.
No, I was going to make it sound as if you weren't visiting anybody that you knew, that you were just walking around a normal, non-beautiful
I knew
graveyard.
Karl Marx very well, I have to say, intimately. Lovely spot, by the way, if you've not been to Highgate Cemetery, head on in. At the moment, normally, get this, right? I think it's the west side. There's two different sides of the road. One of them, the one with Karl Marx in, is the one that you wander around on your own. But the other one is the older side, the west side. It's got all of these tombs, catacombs, like incredible things that haven't been opened for hundreds of years. It's amazing, and at the moment, because of COVID restrictions, you can buy a ticket and walk around there on your own. Normally, it's guided tour only, and you don't get the opportunity to go off and sort of explore on your own. At the moment, you do. Now, there are many areas of the cemetery which are unsafe.
Explore on your own is not a good graveyard phrase.
Well, anyway, do visit. It's well worth the money.
I want to do my own thing. I don't want a guide. What is your own thing in the graveyard?
Yeah. Well, there we go. That's the end. We've got to put a shift in today, haven't we? Put a shift in. Showing Alex and JJ up for not being here. We've done a really good job. I hope everyone's enjoyed it, enjoyed listening. I hope everyone will forever remember Hwang as a big lad, even though he's not. And I hope that, people will reflect on this time that they've spent today with fondness. There you go. Seb Stafford Bloor, thanking you.
Thanking you, Joe Devine.
Yes, and we will be back next week with the usual cast, I believe. So look forward to that. Until then, bienvenue, por favor, dankeschön, au revoir, and tschüss.